So today's game is based on a solo game that I did a couple of years ago. Can't believe it's a couple of years ago, but yeah. It's basically based on the Battle of Ntombe in Zululand in 1879. That particular battle only involved one company of British basically getting themselves massacred through poor leadership skills. I've adapted the scenario slightly to enable me to put more figures down on the table. So in this case, the British have two full companies split into half-size units for a little bit more tactical flexibility within the barricades that they've set up, and another half company the other side of the river looking after the cattle, so they can come into the battle as well at some point. Then surrounding them we have 7 units of Zulus of varying quality. So the scenario was that the historical scenario was that with the commencement of the Zulu War in 1879, the village of Lüneburg, situated in the disputed territories of northern Zululand, felt extremely exposed to attack. 4 companies of the 80th Regiment of Foot were sent to reinforce the local garrison, but by the end of February they needed resupply. 18 wagons of supplies were sent to the town and were escorted from the border by 1 company of British infantry. However, heavy rains had swollen the river and softened the ground, resulting in serious delays. Eventually, some wagons were able to cross the Ntombe Drift, but 6 wagons remained on the enemy side of the river. Major Tucker dispatched Captain David Moriarty with about 100 men, just shy of a full company, to lager the wagons on the far bank and wait for the waters to recede. The wagons were arranged in a rough V shape, but were not moved when the river subsided, meaning there was a significant gap between the wagons and the river. In addition, Captain Moriarty did not send out sufficient pickets, so on the night of the 11th of March the Zulus were able to get very close before being spotted. The resulting battle was more of a massacre than a battle, with Moriarty being one of the first to fall. A group of 40 survivors were able to escape under the command of Sergeant Anthony Clark Booth, and he actually won a VC for his bravery. So my game, as I say, uses slightly more troops inside the barricades, but also slightly more Zulus on the outside. But what I'm doing is I'm recreating the fact that it's a night attack and the Zulus have got complete surprise. So I am starting the game at the point at which the British finally see the Zulus. In reality, in the actual encounter, the Zulus pretty much got to the barricades before the British realised. But what I've done to replicate the fact that the British aren't prepared, it's the middle of the night after all, 2 halves of the company, so this is B company and A company, and I've split them into 2 sections. So what I've done is one section from each company is actually not quite at the barricade, so they're going to have to move rather than fire in the first turn if they want to get up to the barricades. And the way that I've worked it is, although I've only charged myself the points for one whole company, I've given them an extra NCO just to represent the fact that this half company can give itself orders and act independently if necessary. It gives the company slightly more tactical ability options, and would enable the company basically to fire on 2 different enemies, for instance. However, for the point of taking into account the leadership trait and for overall leadership tests, I'm going to be using just the commander for that particular company, so they'll be treated as a whole company in that respect. So a slight variation on the rules to allow a little bit more tactical flexibility, and as I say, there's a half unit over here and I've just put an NCO in charge of them rather than another leader. So that's it. We're ready to start the game. The Zulus are the attackers, so they're going to move first. And as I say, they've now been spotted, and we'll see what happens. So before I start play, I just thought I'd run through a few specific details. So on this side of the river, you've got a half company commanded by an NCO. So I haven't rolled for leadership traits and stuff for him, because it's only a half company, but they are sharpshooters, so they're in the actual battle. The troops on this side of the river did they ended up in hand-to-hand melee combat with the Zulus, but they also offered some supporting fire from this side of the bank. So that's what these guys are for. At the moment, I'm treating them as in their camp. So when the fighting starts, the next turn they will be able to move. So initially they're completely unawares of what's going on. Then over here we have a company, and as I've already said, I've split it into two halves. So it's one company with one commander, but what I've done is I've given it an NCO just to represent the fact that I'm going to let half of the company do separate orders from the other half, just to give them a little bit more tactical flexibility. And the leader of a company is a bag of nerves, which basically means the first time his unit is pinned, I'll have to roll to see if he deserts his troops. And then over on this side, we have B company. So again, split them into two, giving them an NCO. The NCO doesn't have its own leadership traits, but the commander is a keen shot. So once per turn, he may re-roll a miss if they're shooting. And then just to give the British some chance, I've given them an extra NCO in the middle. And again, nothing according to the rules, I'm just playing this fast and loose, but it just means that if an NCO or a leader is killed, there is someone spare to fill the gap if necessary, if he isn't killed himself. And then for the Zulus, we've got the Ingamakoshi, I hope I've pronounced that right. They are just regular tribal infantry, and their commander is inexperienced. So basically they don't get any free actions, unlike normal. So that's the difference there. And then we have the Umsiju. Their leader is steady, so he gives them a slightly improved leadership rating. And then veterans over here, the Nkonke, and their leader is a fine fellow, which basically means he has no effect whatsoever on the unit. So that was a rather silly roll. So there you have it. So we're now ready to start playing. As I say, the Zulus are going to get to go first because they've got a surprise attack effectively. The Zulus advance as fast as they can towards the line, although the veterans there have held back slightly to take advantage of the rough ground that will give them some cover until the British are occupied by the other units first. However, over on this side, this unit, because of its leader, the units need to make a leadership test if they want to move, and one of the units didn't move. It only rolled a 3 and it needed a 6 to be able to take an action. So the plan for the Zulus on that flank has gone slightly awry. Nonetheless, the British are still looking at a lot of Zulus at very close quarters, and many of the men are still trying to pull their trousers up and get to the front lines. The British fire start, and they manage to cause some casualties on one of the Zulu units on their flank, forcing them to be pinned. So they've stopped moving while they sort of recover from the shock of that close firing from the British. Meanwhile, however, over on the other side, part of B Company's troop has opened fire, but they haven't had as much luck in stopping the Zulus. So both those units are still coming on. However, both of the other halves of their companies, here and here, have, under their commands of their NCO, have managed to get up to the barricades. So next turn, they'll be able to take part either defending the barricades or firing. Down here, however, on the other side of the river, this half company, they're still rolling out of the tents, pulling up their trousers and pulling up their braces and thinking what the hell is going on. So they won't be able to do anything until the next turn. The Zulus move quickly to close the distance. Here, one unit's managed to reach the barricade, just as the British have reached it, but they have not taken any fire on the way in, so they're at full strength. Equally, these two units over here with elite troops have both managed to get to the line, although this unit has taken some casualties in the move towards it. Meanwhile, the veterans have moved up, but they haven't got in contact yet. They're waiting for the line to be softened to see what happens. The half company on the other side of the river has moved up into position, ready to open fire, but that's all they can do this turn. And like I say, they're still rubbing the sleep from their eyes and thinking what the heck is going on. As are pretty much most of the people inside there as well, because they've just been tumbling out of their tents and quickly rushed up to the barricades. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to resolve this melee here. And in fact, I've just rolled, and the result was pretty spectacular. In that it achieved nothing. Essentially what happens is when the Zulus attacking across the barricade, you now need, instead of 1 dice per kill, it now needs to be 2 dice per kill, because of the defence bonus for the British. So they managed to get 2 out of their 16 dice, which basically means they only managed to do 1 casualty on the British. Meanwhile, the British fighting back, their dice count 1 for 1, and they managed to do 2 casualties on the Zulus, which means that against all the odds, the British have just won that melee. So here, this unit failed in its attack, was forced back, and had to take a pin test. It failed, so it's now pinned. And then over on this side, both units, amazingly, failed their assault. So the British have taken a bit of casualties. Each of these half companies have taken 3 men, so basically down to half strength. Actually, I'm going to take a model off of there. But these 2, they were both forced back. This one in this turn has had to be pinned, or had to make a pin test and failed. This one, because it was it fell back, but it didn't. It was a draw, rather. Sorry, and so it doesn't have to take a pin test, but nonetheless, it was forced back. You know, the British have taken some casualties, but it's not quite as dire as it could have been, because if any one of those melees had managed to force the British back, it would have left a big hole in their defences. So we'll go on to the next turn, and then I'll tell you what happened. So end of the next turn, and the Zulus have been attacking on all fronts. This unit charged in, but was managed to be thrown back. Took a lot of casualties and was pinned in the result. So they've been thrown back and pinned. This unit was also thrown back, but managed to pass its pin save by the skin of its teeth. So that will be able to move again next turn. Over here, quite dramatic, really. This unit again was draw with the British, but they've taken quite a lot of casualties by now. They've taken 7 out of a 16-figure unit, and they've been thrown back. This unit failed its pin save and had to pull back even further. These charged into melee and were beaten. Sorry, that dice is slightly wrong. Were beaten quite soundly, and forced back and had to take a pin test, which they then failed. And then down here, the sharpshooters half company on the other side of the river opened fire on the remaining veteran unit, and did an unbelievable amount of damage. 5 casualties, forcing a pin test, and that unit has now been pinned. So at the moment, most of the Zulus are actually being held back. However, look at the casualties inside that barricade. Most of those units have taken damage. And what I'm doing is I'm marking off the total number of casualties from the original unit size, rather than based on the figures that are on the table. So this base represents 2 men rather than the 4 figures that are on it, for instance. However, that unit of 6, that was originally 6-men unit, half a company, has now been reduced by 5. So basically there's 1 man, an NCO, and I put the captain in charge. He's been running around the battlefield joining units. I'm letting him, the rules, I've decided that he can move anywhere inside that barricade and move as a free action to join them, just to give the British some chance. And so far he's been on this side of the fight, joining in over here. He's rushed over to here and saved the day. A lot braver than the original commander in the actual historical battle. This unit likewise has been reduced by 5 men, so it's down to 1 man and the lieutenant. This isn't going to go very well for the British at this rate. This unit's in slightly better shape. They're down to about half their original strength plus their NCO. I'm going to put him on the edge there. Again, this one's at half strength. Difference is most of the Zulus are pinned, so it's now just a matter of seeing what happens in the larger game and seeing whether the Zulus can finally get across those barricades, because I think once that happens, it's all over for the British. Or maybe I spoke too soon about the British being on the losing side of this, because they managed to throw back yet another assault, doing yet more damage to this unit, although this time it managed to save on its pinning test. But over here they managed to throw back the assault here, which from a unit that was admittedly taking quite a bit of damage, it got pushed back with 0 casualties for that British unit. Well, it's already down to only 1 man, and it's NCO and its commander, but it still managed to throw it back, and that unit has now been pinned. This unit failed its pin test at the beginning of the turn and had to fall back, so it's further out of the fight. This veteran unit was thrown back from the fight with a really one-sided set of dice. So over here, so they've been pushed back, although this time they managed to pass their pinning test, so they're not pinned, so they'll be able to move again if they don't take any more casualties. And then this unit come under fire from, again, the half unit over here. Took an enormous amount of damage. I mean, they've really taken a battering from the guns, and they got pinned. So the Zulus are still being kept back from the barricades, even though there's not many British left inside, it has to be said. But nonetheless, the fight is going on a lot longer than I thought it was going to. Well, I'm flabbergasted. I've just done the Zulus move, and I've tested the pinned units to see if they can unpin, and 3 Zulu units failed by such a margin that they rout and remove from the table. So the 2 units here and one of the veteran units over here. So I've got them fleeing from the table at the moment. I'm removing them. I can't believe this. This is quite spectacular, to be honest, because that shouldn't happen. But there you go. What happens in the rules, and that unit's gone. The British are still in a bad way, but it has to be said, the situation doesn't look quite as dire as it did a few minutes ago. There's still, however, a melee here to resolve and a melee here to resolve. If the British can throw these guys back, they might actually stand a chance of winning this. It all depends what happens on these 2 melees. So finally the inevitable has happened. The British have managed to lose a melee and have had to fall back from their barricades. So what you can see I've done is the half company that was here, this is the remains of the half company that was defending the barricade. They've had to pull back, but then what I've allowed is the other half company, when in their move, to merge. So what we've got here is the total. They've now, that whole company has taken 8 casualties out of a total of 12. So we're down to 4 men, or 2 bases, and they're 2 NCOs. I've been rolling for NCO and commander casualties all the way through, and I haven't lost anyone, except for now. So over on this side, again, the veterans have managed to win their melee. They've wiped out the rest of the infantrymen, so that base has been removed. And I've just rolled, and the captain has just rolled a double 1, so he has been removed. So that's not good. That NCO will join that the remains of his company in a minute. Not that there's a lot left. There's basically 1 man. I think I'm now going to call this, because that's it. The Zulus have done it. They're going to move next turn, and there's absolutely nothing left that the British can use really to fight. It's now going to come down to, as in history, the men on this side of the river making a fighting retreat to get off the table. So what I might do is I might play out 1 more turn just to see if they can start a retreat, because essentially what happened was the NCO took command of the men and took them in, and they managed to hole up in a cabin, and he actually won a VC for his bravery in commanding the men. He was only an NCO, a sergeant, but he was very brave. Probably the one highlight, the one brave point of this action, which was otherwise a massacre. Now, in this game, the British have lasted a lot longer and done a lot more casualties than I anticipated they would. They were massively outnumbered, but they were also behind barricades, which gave them a massive advantage in melee. So the game went the way I expected it, sort of, because the Zulus had a much tougher time than anticipated. So I did the Zulu moves just to see what would happen, and yes, the Zulus get across the barricades and into melee over here. Now that the British have lost their bonus for fighting behind barricades, I don't think they're going to win, even though this Zulu unit has been reduced from 16 down to 9 men. Still 9 dice versus 4, 5, 6 dice. They should win, and they're rolling the same for their fight value. So I actually think that the likelihood is the British will lose that fight. Certainly here, these British are not only facing a fight across the barricades against the Zulus there, but the veterans that had got over the fence were able to swing round, and they had just enough move to actually make contact with the side. So basically, these are down to one man and the lieutenant and an NCO. So that's 3 dice against, I can't even be bothered to count it up, it's horrendous. They're dead, basically. So the British have lost, and over here I've quickly measured the roll. The NCO is wisely leading what's left of his half company, because he knows that any second now the Zulus are going to cross that drift and will be coming after them. So yep, the fight went the way it did sort of historically, although the British put up much more of a fight than anticipated, but that was actually quite an enjoyable little game, and a few little changes I made, such as splitting the units in two and giving the British some extra NCOs, actually made for a more interesting fight. But at the end of the day, I did start the game with quite a significant reduction. The British only had 19 points worth on the table, and the Zulus started with 27 points worth. But that was pretty much what happened historically. They were outnumbered, they were in a bad position, they didn't put out pickets so that they couldn't see and react to the Zulus quickly enough, and the British paid the price. This sort of a replication of that battle just replicated the effect. But yeah, a very interesting and very enjoyable little fight, and the British put up much more of a fight than expected.